yesterday, my cell phone disappeared on me. And I said, now I know I saw you walk in. Huh? How are you this morning?
I am doing great. Blessed, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I said, boy, what happened? Well, it's good to see you.
It's always good to see you, Randy.
What we're going to do is I'm going to start from scratch because I'm doing two things. I'm videotaping this so that it can play back on the selmapostherald.com website.
Okay.
And so people can know you. I don't want to assume that we have people who are listening. There may be some people who don't know anything about you, or your history, or your platform.
Okay.
And so we want to give you this opportunity to do that, to introduce our audience to you and to your platform. By pure chance, I ran into your husband at Walmart. If you want to run into anybody, you go to Walmart.
That's the next spot right here. So.
And the crazy part about it is we both ended up standing in line together.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So what, y'all saw each other somewhere else and then ended up in
line? No, I was out putting the paper out and I said, well, let me stop by Walmart for a minute. And then, I'm not used to seeing Franklin without the kids. Usually he's got a whole troop, he's got a whole tribe with him.
Especially these days.
Yeah, so that was one time he was by himself. That's why I didn't recognize him at first. But we talked, and so I'm just glad that things worked out like they did.
Well, I am glad that you ran into him. He has been, Franklin, for some of you may know him as the Bishop of the Black Belt. He has just been so amazing during this campaign. He stood up at one of my campaign events and said, well, some of you are worried about the children. I got the children. And he's such a great dad.
Have him.
No. Sometimes with some men, the children have them, but not in this case. He has them.
I know him with a lot of kids on many occasions.
Yes.
I always tease them when I see them like that.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Malika, where you were born and where you went to school and all of that kind of stuff.
So I have been in Selma all of my life. I was born in a hospital in Birmingham, but my parents were already living in Selma. They just went over to the hospital there, in a community hospital, and I have lived here all my life. I went off to college, graduated from Selma High, went to Valley Grand Elementary School, and then to Edgewood, and then to East Side. So all the schools that you can go to, going from elementary to high school. And then I went off to college, came back after college, and the only time in my adult life that I've spent anywhere else is in Nashville, Tennessee with my sister Inca, but it was for less than a year. So.
Excuse me, what school did you go to? What college?
Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia.
And you got a degree in?
Psychology.
Okay. But now you also have passed the bar, I understand.
Yes. Later on in life, I had gone to law school, to Jones Law School, many years ago for about a semester or two. And that's when you could commute and go in the evenings, and was challenged with the commute. I was working full time. I was a mom, and I found myself sleeping or about to fall asleep on the way from the commute. So I said, this is probably not a good idea right now, and decided maybe I'll do that when I'm retired. But my husband came along and decided he wanted to go to law school. And so he was, studying the LSAT and deciding what he was going to do about that. And we were at a party at my parents' house, and somebody said, some folks who were going to the same school, BSOAL, Birmingham School of Law, in Birmingham, said, well, they have a Saturday program. And at that point, I had little children. So I wasn't thinking about going to law school, but when we found out there was a Saturday program, my husband was like, well, you should, look at that, because you don't have to be away from the children a few hours each Saturday. So that may be doable. And of course, things are always more challenging than they seem when you set out. But glory to God, we made it through.
So how long did it take you?
So the program, I think, is about 3.5 years. And that third year, well, the semester before the last semester, I was pregnant. And so my husband, yet again, he was like, well, maybe we need to speed things up. So we went to the dean, and he was like, I was like, I'm pregnant. He was like, oh, so you want to slow things down? And we looked at each other and said, no, we want to speed things up. So we actually graduated early from the program, even with the children and all of that. So the hand of the Lord was with us, and we made it through and walked on the stage together. It's one of my favorite pictures, seeing us walk across the stage together.
That's interesting. How many kids do you have now?
Have six. One is a senior in college. She's at Spelman College, the college I went to, and she graduates in May.
What does she major in?
She majored in early childhood education. In fact, she's already a certified teacher. She has passed the boards to become certified already. In fact, I was at Selma High yesterday talking to some of the people who taught her, and they were like, she's a senior already? Because that time just goes so fast.
Time is moving really fast.
Yes.
Now, so here we are. Is there anywhere in my mind where I seem to have remembered you not ever being interested in politics?
Yes. I've known you for a long time, Randy.
You ever running for office?
Yes, that was not my plan. But we plan and God plans. I was definitely not interested in running for office. There's just a lot of, sort of it doesn't have to be this way, but we tend as a culture to make it a couple of things. One, we tend to make it, kind of messy sometimes, and I'm just it's not my personality. I just don't deal in mess, and so that was one of my reasons. And the other thing is, like a lot of people out there right now, I voted mostly out of a sense that people died and made a sacrifice, whether it was people who said no taxation without representation, and they wanted to leave, they wanted to leave sort of the mother country and have America be its own country, or it was the people who march on, from Selma to Montgomery. People made sacrifices for us to have these rights, and so I mostly voted out of that because I didn't see the kind of changes that I thought voting should yield. And right now, a lot of people are discouraged, feeling that way. But I became a Christian, and hope is a different kind of thing in Jesus Christ. And so I began to realize, I had some experiences, begin to realize that, if we don't just vote and leave people there, right? Because generally speaking, especially in certain communities, people go out to vote and then they just expect you to figure out how to do the right thing and just kind of leave it there. Not engaging, not writing letters, not saying what it is that they want. And when I realized that there was a different way to do that, I became intrigued, not yet interested with running for office, but intrigued. And I was reading my Bible one morning. I love the Word of God. I study it. I think of it as literally the bread of life. So if I eat 3 times a day, I want to get some Word as many times a day as possible. And I was studying my Bible many years ago, and said, I saw the word senator just kind of leap out at me, and through my relationship with the Lord, began to think that was something I was being called to.
Is this a relative?
It's my daughter.
Okay, all right, so now, I'm on record of being critical of black elected officials in the black belt of Alabama for the last 30, 40 years. We got to, the Voting Rights Act was passed. There's an unprecedented number of black elected officials. I often say from the dog catcher and when President Obama became president to the President of the United States. Yet our circumstances seem to have gotten worse. The incarceration rate of black men is unacceptable. Black on black crime is unacceptable. Illiteracy is unacceptable. And the list goes on and on. We've lost businesses. There are less black-owned businesses than there were when segregation was legal. So what are you going to do different if elected as state senator what will you do different to address some of the issues that are facing not just the Black community, but
our community as a whole?
Community as a whole.
Well, before I go to that, Randy, I'd like to address what I think that challenge is, why things seem to have gotten worse.
Right.
The way you framed it, I want to address that first, if you don't mind. So I think the first thing is that, so I've had so many people say, we were better off, when segregation was happening, and some of these are Black people, who wouldn't say that necessarily in front of white people, but there's that theory, that understanding, and it's similar to sort of for some of the same reasons that you're expressing. And I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but some of the same reasons.
No, I'm not the one that says, well, we need to have a white mayor in order to go forward. I mean, we need somebody that's got the skill set, regardless of what color.
The heart and skill set.
Right,
and I think right now where we are is in fact, one of the reasons why I'm interested in Walt Maddox is because I think after talking to him and doing a little research, he has both heart and skill set. But we'll come back to that later. But I think, I've already said that I'm just passionate about the Word of God. And when I study the Israelites, right, there is a sort of a process that they go through. And there's a deliverance out of slavery, right? But then there's the wilderness experience, right? And this is a place where, even though God has done great and mighty things, pardon the Red Sea, and all of that, there is this dynamic where for the people who are suffering through the wilderness, it seems like it's worse. They even cry out. At least we had corn and some good stuff back in Egypt. Let us go back. What have you done to us? Right? They're angry with the leadership. They're upset. Moses has made great sacrifices. Right? Like, it was not easy. At one point, he says, "Look, did I birth these children, or am I their father?" Right? Yeah. Right? He's frustrated. He's so upset because in order even to be prepared for this task, he had to go through the wilderness himself for 40 years to learn how to get through the wilderness, right? So that's hard on a man, right? 40 years in the wilderness, you feel like you missed your destiny. Then 40 years of dealing with people grumbling and complaining about what it is that you're doing to try to get them somewhere. It's not an easy task. So much so that he says, "God, Father, can you just go on and take me home? Like, this is just too much for me," right? And then at that point, God gives him an answer and puts into place a system so that there are judges. He's not the only one. His father-in-law comes to him and says, "Look, this is too much for one man. You need to break this up." And the Lord gives him, men who are faithful to God and who care about people, and puts them in place so that he has some help. And it's not, all these folks just on this one man. And so I think, and so when I had this conversation recently with someone who said, "I think we were better off," I said, at that point, in particular, African Americans, we did not, when we didn't have the right to vote, or we may have had it, but it was not, we weren't able to use it, right? It wasn't enforced. And then when, people, we couldn't even sit on a jury, right? There's so many things that were affected beyond just what meets the eye, right? And so I just believe that was part of what we have experienced is a wilderness experience, right? Where it looks like we're going backwards, even though God's plan is to take not just us, but everybody forward. I think we live in a context that we believe in win and lose too often, and I believe in win-win. I don't believe God created a world where only one group of people could prosper and everybody. That is not biblical principles. We can rise together, and I believe we need leadership that recognizes that we can rise together, and we need folks working together who believe and have faith that we can rise together, and I believe we will rise together. All of our community.
Well, and I don't say that African Americans have gone backwards, because the opportunities that exist, not just for African Americans, but for all Americans,
are greater.
Much greater. Unlimited, in fact. My problem is, we have all these unlimited opportunities, but if you're not prepared, if you don't have the skill set to take advantage of these opportunities, they may as well not exist. And so, and that's my concern. What can we do, and what can you do if elected to this position to help create an environment that helps move this area in a better position? create more jobs, greater educational opportunities, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And so I guess that will lead into what is your platform?
Yes, it certainly does. Let me just say this. There are clearly sort of, we have software and hardware, right? We have, soft tools and hard tools. I think there are some concrete things that we need done. But I believe that there's some soft things that we have to tackle in order to get those concrete things done, right? And I believe the issue of unity is really an amazing place that we have to start. Because I think we've had a lot of great ideas. We have so much potential in the Black Belt of Alabama. I mean, it literally just, amazes me how much potential, how much God has already invested, the resources, the land, the people, the history. We have so much to work with, and there are towns that don't have as much to work with, right?
We got a river coming through.
We have a river coming. We have a whole riverfront, right? I mean, there are towns that have far less to work with that flourish.
Airport. 4-lane highway.
Yeah. We have too much to work with.
3 colleges. We had 4.
I mean, come on, Randy. Like, with all of that, we should be somewhere different. And I really believe that the reason why we have not made it to somewhere different is because divided we fall, united we stand, divided we fall. It's very simple, right? And which is also a biblical principle. A house divided cannot stand. It cannot stand. And so our education system cannot stand. Our economy cannot stand. Our government cannot stand. That's where we are right now because we are divided. It's not a lack of resources, right? It is a lack of determination to work together. And that is the cornerstone, I believe, of my platform. And I know for people that's a little challenging, right? You come from this family, the Sanders family, there's all this controversy, but as a believer in Christ Jesus, I believe that the Holy Spirit, and I know people have a hard time with politics and spirituality, but for me, right, the only way we're going to come out of this, I was having a conversation with Judge Ballard yesterday in his office. I was going there for, some legal reasons and happened to stop in. And, it's going to take divine intervention. We can't fix this by ourselves.
I hear you. Okay. Well, put a pin in that, because, I think, yes, you're the daughter of Senator Hank Sanders and Attorney Fire Rose Torrey, and both of them have different public personas.
They do.
They do. The public perceives both of them almost opposite. In terms of the way that they are perceived.
And it is a perception. When I'm saying what I'm saying is I'm speaking to the perception. I mean, I actually grew up with them. I know that there are people who believe that, one or both of them have issues with white people and all those things. But, we have somebody white in our family, people who have slept in our house, but it's a perception. And so when I say that, I'm really speaking to that perception, right, that there's, somehow, some issues there. And I'm not saying that there are no issues. I think we have issues throughout our communities on these issues. It's
multi-layered.
It is multi-layered.
That's part of the problem.
That's part of the challenge. But I think that divine intervention can help us cut through that. Maybe we have to kind of go sink so deeply that we are willing to work together just to come out of it.
Well, I mean, let's talk frankly for a minute. Mm-hmm. I mean, in order for Senator Sanders to have become the chair of finance, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. Was it finance or taxation or educational chair? I forgot.
It's education. The education.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't have done that without right support.
He couldn't have. And in fact, Randy, what I think is so intriguing, in Dallas County, people may have some different issues. I even have white people, quite frankly, sometimes come up to me and like when the hospital was about to close and he stepped in and, helped with the law to make sure that.
Wilcox County?
No, here in Selma.
Okay.
That it didn't, this was some years back. Okay. So when, certain things have happened, I've even had white people come up to me and say, thank your dad for helping us. So I'm not saying that there isn't white support for him in Selma, but when I go to other counties, as I've campaigned, as I've talked to people, because people should know that Senate District 23 is 8 counties. It's not just Dallas County, there are 8 counties. And so as I've gone to these different counties, people have, really been supportive of my dad and talked about all the amazing, wonderful things that he has done. And I think we have that in all sides here. So we've taken sides in Dallas County, but I think people bring great things to the table. The problem is we need to bring those things together. And if we can bring those things together, we will see a new situation, new excellence, new levels of excellence in our economy and education. I really do believe that we have what it takes. We just got to bring it together.
We're going to go to the phone line in a few minutes, but I want to let Ms. Fortier finish her platform first, and then we'll open the phone line up for questions from our audience.
Okay, so I'm going to focus on this very quickly. So the first part is unity. That is actually on my card as part of the platform, because I believe it's vital to our ability to thrive. The next area is sustainability, and I think that it kind of goes back to some of those things that we're saying we already have. We have so much that we need. We just need to leverage the resources that we have so that we can flourish. So we need to work together, and then we need to be strategic about how do we use the riverfront, right? I believe that once there's another level of unity, we'll also have another level of support from the community for the projects that we start. Because one of the challenges is we start on something, and then, maybe there's some support in the beginning, maybe it wanes, and then it doesn't come to fruition. And so a large part of my platform under sustainability is taking the very resources that you and I have just spoken about and working together to make those things, make more jobs, and not just jobs, but jobs with a living wage. Our county is, one of the poorest counties in the state, and we can change that. We can change that through leveraging those resources. I believe that we can also attract other counties. I have heard, conversation after conversation, talk to people all over the place about attempts that we've made in the past, even to bring other people in, maybe businesses or consultants or feasibility studies. And one of the things that they keep saying over and over again is, until you deal with this issue of division, all this other stuff can't happen well. And so I believe we can attract larger companies. My desire is for them to be environmentally friendly, right? I think we are in a crisis in our environment, and we cannot afford to just bring companies, even if it's going to hurt workers, even if it's going to hurt families.
In Perry County,
we have to be thoughtful. Coal ash. We're going to have to be thoughtful about the companies that we go after. But I think that we've had some attempts at this in the past. Groups of people, elected officials who will come together at one point and go lay out a plan to develop our economy and bring in more jobs. And then it kind of falls apart. And so I think one of the things that I bring to the table is the ability to stick and stay, right? Even through insults. Like, I'm just one of those people. God has just blessed me with the ability, even in this campaign,
You think you have thick skin, huh?
Well, I don't even think it's thick skin. I think what it is that it's a heart literally for Jesus Christ. And so he had to go through a lot of stuff in order to have us deliver. And so he expects us to pick up our cross daily, and when somebody comes after us, to love them back, and not to just, because most of the time when people are coming after us, it's because there's something inside of them that's hurting, that's fearful, that's an issue. And a lot of times we let whatever's hurting in us that's fearful kind of come back. And so I believe that there's a different way to do that. And so with our economy, I think we have to bring people together, yes, yet again, but have the faith and the leadership that it takes to see it through to the end. So that's part of what I think we have to do. I want to support worker-owned businesses to encourage fair wages and wealth building for local people. I think if people are invested, in something, and they can see what it takes to run a business, right? Because a lot of times people want higher wages, but they don't understand the sacrifice it takes for the owner to give higher wages, right? But I think oftentimes, we need a different dynamic. We need a paradigm shift.
Now, are you talking co-op or a form of what I would consider socialism, or are you speaking of another type of worker ownership in business?
Okay, so I certainly don't see cooperatives as socialism, but we won't get into that debate. But what I want to say is that I think that that there are different ways that this can happen, and it can be through partnership. In fact, I think it would be great if we took some of the buildings that are falling down, right, on Broad Street, and created special programs so that people can, maybe they have 6 months, or maybe they have, and other cities have done this already, where they have a period of time, and the community invests in that business, right, and so you get the rehabbing of the building, so it makes everything look more beautiful. You have workers who come together to start a business together, partners who start a business together, so that they can, start new businesses and get fresh energy going in our communities. So that's one of the things that I want to see done. I think we have to go after more resources for our public schools intentionally, right? Go after grants and resources for our infrastructure intentionally. Being very assertive and bold, because I think we have also what we need in terms of statistics in our communities to get more grants and resources. I'm not sure that we're going after them as assertively as we could. I want to enhance the use of our local assets, and we've talked about that some. I also want to deal with issues of restorative and preventive justice, right? We have crazy situations around violence in our community, and it's going to be hard to attract businesses, right, if they don't feel like their workers will have good schools and that they'll be safe. I mean, these are just basic things that any human being needs to want to live somewhere. And I was also talking to Judge Ballard about this yesterday, that growing up in Selma, it would have never occurred to me that I would have to have a moment like I did even last night, where you hear gunshots in the middle of the night, and then you go check on your children and your babies because they sound close to make sure that they're okay. I would have never fathomed that growing up here in Selma, Alabama. And so those are some of the things that I want to address, and I think that it will take a team approach. We have new people coming into office. Lord willing, I'll be one of them, but we have a new probate judge, coming into office. We have some, new people on the different boards, and so we have some new people coming in. We have people who are already there, who I've been talking to, who want to work in unity, right? So I think that we have what it takes to move a platform like this forward. But a key part of my platform I have not discussed, which kind of relates back to the sharing of responsibility of governing that we talked about a little earlier, and that has to do with deputy senators and ambassadors. I think we are at a different place in our journey as a community, where we need to broaden how decisions are made. Right? We need to have more input from, community members on a consistent basis about how we're represented in government, whether that's city council, whether that's at the state senate, wherever that is. We need more input. And so I have a plan that I've worked on with some great people locally to help us with that, to help us engage more people on an ongoing basis. So when it comes to the budget, that's passed at the state senate. Of course, I can't go to the state senate and say, well, this is what the budget is going to be. There's a process there. But in terms of our local process, I would like my vote to be informed by what local people have to say about how Alabama should be spending our taxes. I would like to have decisions on different bills be informed by how local people feel about how we should be voting on those issues. So that is one of the things that is very key. So citizens' participation, moving to another level, is very important to me.
What's your daughter's name that's with us this morning?
Azali Fortier.
I'm surprised she hasn't gotten restless.
Well,
how old is she?
She wasn't expecting to speak. She's 11 years old.
She's 11th grade?
She is in the 6th grade.
In the 6th grade. Mm-hmm. All right. Tell you what, we're going to open the phone lines up, and but first, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to let you ask some of your questions at 875-1490 right after these messages. 1490 WHBB. Our guest this morning is Malika Fortier, and she is the Democratic, not candidate, but nominee. You got the party nod for State Senate seat District 23. Let's go to the phone line. Are you still there, caller? No. 875-1490 is the number to call if you have comments or questions. As a programming note, Mr. Mark Story is scheduled to come in on Friday for Friday's Viewpoint, and he, of course, is an independent. So I don't really want to get into talking about the way you ended up with the nomination, because I think it would be more of a fairer question for your father as opposed to you. But what do you think about your skill set? What has prepared you for this position, and do you think you can handle it? Do you think how do you think you're going to do?
Well, I've definitely God has definitely prepared me for this position. He finishes what he started, and I said earlier, it wasn't my father that first planted this in my heart. Right, this was for me a spiritual experience, and I never said anything to my dad about that. Like, I didn't go to him and say, well, I felt like when I was reading the Bible, I didn't share that with him. That's just something that I kind of hid in my heart until the right time. So I definitely feel prepared. I have, like I said, I even went back to law school without, not even thinking about this.
It seems like somewhere in my mind you didn't even want to do law school at one point. You weren't looking at the law.
Oh, I was definitely not for the law. Not for being a lawyer. I was for the law, but I went through that phase. In fact, people I think often think, well, my parents had to, pressure me, you need to go to law school or something. And as I said earlier, it was Franklin who said, I'm going to go to law school, you should join me. So, but I was not planning to do that, at least not anytime soon, maybe at retirement. I was not planning to do that, but now that I look back on it, I think that was God, leading me into a place where I could be prepared, because going to the legislature has to do with making laws, right? And so studying the law is great preparation for the law. I think actually practicing law is great preparation, because part of my concern is that oftentimes I think bills get drafted and then passed into law without people really understanding the impact on people and in their everyday lives. And so as an attorney, when you're actually grappling with the facts of somebody's life, because that's essentially what you're doing, you're taking the law and looking at the facts of their life, what happened in their lives, and how the law affects that. And we have instances where there's a law that's on the books, and I don't think somebody thought through, right, the consequences of that. So I think that's part of the preparation. I think, I'm the managing attorney at a business. I've been the executive director at a nonprofit, so I've had various experiences in running organizations and institutions from the business side, from the nonprofit side, looking at all the different issues we have in our community, whether it's, domestic violence or issues with children, educational issues, dealing with education reform. So I've had a gamut of sitting on foundation boards, giving out grants. So I have a myriad of experiences writing grants that really, dovetail into this platform that I've shared.
Okay. Viewpoint, you're on the air, caller.
One thing about it, they won't be able to film us this time, will they? Are you going to do any sketches?
Oh goodness, this is the question that I have no answer for. Let me just be honest with you. So my father has written sketches for over 1,000 weeks straight without ever missing a sketches. He's been in the hospital, he's had surgery, his wife has been in the hospital, there have been near-death experiences, he's been out of the country, and he's never missed one in all of those decades. And so I admit the thought of me trying to do that is a little bit of a challenge for me. When I have been tending towards being a mother of 6, and I think that's also a part of my preparation, quite frankly, Randy. Just, having multiples really prepares you for, and going through law school with children and all of that. You gotta know how to multitask. But to your caller's point, I've been considering more of a blog, right? Like a mommy politics blog, if I'm elected, and then that can be shared in various ways. I've also been considering some kind of something in print that goes out across the district. Whether that's a newsletter, because I also want people in our communities, in these different counties, to also write about what's going on in their communities and what we're doing to rebuild our communities.
Now, my other statement, I guess, is not really a question. Oh, yes, it's going to be a question in the end. Yesterday, I saw some footage whereby one of the, I guess it may have been someone from the Jewish community. No, as a matter of fact, it was a Methodist. He said he was a fellow Methodist, who asked our Attorney General, he went on to cite Matthew 25, 26 when I was sick, 36 when I was sick, you took you clothes, all of that.
Yes.
When I was naked, you clothed me when I was sick. You visited me, and when I was hungry, the whole scenario of the wicked rejects of it. But what I wanted to bring up, now you're a woman who always talk about your Lord and your service to the Lord. And I see you, and I see Miss Dr. Hardy, as people with halos, the Christian smile or the Christian glow that I've always prayed for. Now, if someone would come before you in one of your meetings, if you were, you don't have to be Attorney General, but if someone would come before you, would you have that person escorted out in within cuffs?
So, well, glory to God for the compliment. Of course, I am no.
We're going to some other people get through too. Thank you. Go ahead.
Of course, I have no halo, but thank you for the encouragement. I believe, and this goes back to what I was saying about unity, right? You just got to be a person who is willing to sacrifice your own ego, your own, ideas about what you should have to put up with and what you shouldn't have to put up with in order for unity to work. So I believe in meeting with everybody. And there is a video going around, and it does have some facts that are true in it, with a man who asked to meet with me, and he asked in front of City Hall, and I didn't have my calendar. I had some things planned at that time, and forgot to actually show up at the meeting. And I want to make a public apology to him, but it had nothing to do with not wanting to meet with him. I still want to meet with him, but I will meet with anybody. There's no one, and I have met, all you name it in our community, people who have been criticized even for white supremacy. I will sit down and meet with anybody. I will meet with President Trump. I will meet. There's no, but my only rule is that it does have to be everybody. Sometimes people don't mind you meeting with the person that they like that other people don't like, but then they get upset if you meet with this person that they don't. That I don't agree with, right? So if you're gonna meet with everybody, you meet with everybody. So there's not a president we've had that I wouldn't meet with. There is not a person in this community I wouldn't meet with. I will meet with everybody because I believe that is the heart of the Lord.
The caller said something about somebody being escorted out in handcuffs. I don't know what incident she's referring to, but if you become a state senator and you're in the chambers at the state capitol in Montgomery, they have protocol and rules
that I wouldn't have any control over.
I wouldn't think so.
Especially on the floor. But I was thinking that she meant, where somebody, you're in a forum where it's okay for that person to be there,
right,
and they start, making, noise or getting upset. There are different ways that can be handled, and sometimes people handle that with law enforcement. That would probably not be my way of doing that.
Okay, Viewpoint, you're on the air, caller.
Good morning, Randy. Good morning, Senator Sanders, 48.
Not yet.
I want to know your opinion on how do you feel about charter schools in the state of Alabama?
charter schools in the state of Alabama. So here are some of so I think that we need to have an excellent educational system. And I think that there are different ways for us to get there. And quite frankly, it is important to me that public schools do not suffer. That they do not suffer financially, that they do not suffer, because that's where the majority of our children go. But I have, myself with my children, we've explored different kinds of schooling, right? I have homeschooled, I have done private school, I've done public school. So I am open to what works best for children. And that includes charter schools. I just want to make sure that public schools don't suffer as we explore other alternatives.
Also, well, no, let me let some other callers get through, and then I've got one or two other questions that may be a little tougher in terms of some of these issues that we're facing. Viewpoint, you're on the air.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's Malika, attorney for DA. Malika, attorney for DA. I really think that anybody who has not been in the community, giving their service pro bono, cannot really exemplify a need to be a senator or a mayor or a council person. You have to have done the groundwork. Now, I know what the elephant in the room is. If you running for this office, and Benny know too, but it would be so controversial for him to outright ask me. You are the daughter of Hank, the daughter of Fire Rose. But what they don't know about you is you're your own person. Mm-hmm. You are your own person. And I would not support you if I felt that you were going to get in office and somebody else was going to run the office. I know that you are independent, you've proven it in the court system, working with our youth. You didn't have a candidate that has done the things that you've done in the community without pay now, and the sacrifices you make, and having your own family to take care of. You're out 9 to the clock at night taking care of other people's families. Give me a candidate that does that kind of sacrifice, then I would consider supporting that candidate. But it's not happening. It's not happening. So until I've had the Mark story. I've had the Mark story experience. And I'm not going to go there with Randy because he clearly remembers it, but he ran against himself. Mark story has never been a person that wanted to connect the dots with African Americans. I don't care how many black people he get on there and do his commercials. He has never been in my community to see what my needs were or my people's needs. Come leave it there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for calling. I'll tell you what, let's take this break, and I'll be back with more guests this morning. One thing that the caller did say that I should really, instead of addressing you as Miss or Mrs., is really attorney. I have to get used to saying attorney, Malika Fortier. You know, yeah. So she's absolutely correct. We'll be back with more right after this.
I am Carmen.
Well, it's been
That I'd love to come back and have at some other time.
But I will briefly say, as she was asking me about my views on co-ops, I have a problem with co-ops because I was telling her I don't know anybody that's made any money, made a profit from a co-op, And
I was sharing with you, and I'd love to come back and actually give, some concrete examples. But I've done some research on people who literally, make great money, especially compared to what we're making, on average here in Alabama and in the county.
Dr. A.G. Gaston, he took Win Radio and he took Booker T. Washington Insurance Company and the bank, and he made his employees part owners in his business. And I don't know how that worked out in terms of profit share, you know.
Sometimes, it's like, corporations even give stock options so that people feel invested, in the company.
I can go with that. I was just, I was saying that, I don't, now that we've got to the promised land, don't change the game. Now it's everybody share equally. It's like, wait a minute,
No, I think it's all about choice, right? Like, you just get to choose which ways you'd like to engage in helping our economy to flourish.
Although, now, I should be the first to say, well, although a lot of times the very people that need it the most are the ones that will criticize, but, when you start talking about free education and free health care, those are issues that can be really tricky, in terms of, in the context of a capitalistic society,
Well, that definitely is another conversation that we should get into one day, because, we don't have a pure, well, anyway, that is a discussion for another day.
Viewpoint, you there, Colin?
Well, we already found out that I'm not going to say, I'll say it maybe a journey, because the last time I started to say something about a lady that was guest here, I got into trouble, so I'll leave it and refer to you as the attorney. But anyway, we do remember you going to Venezuela and coming back saying that you were so enthralled with what was Hugo Chavez that it just stunned me. But can you look around the black belt and see what might have been, as you named a list of things, that might have helped the black belt in the last 40 years practically, that your father has been the senator?
Yes, sure.
I mean, he has never had a town hall meeting, and the last senator that we had, we got the lane paved from Montgomery to Selma. We got the junior college. We got a road straightened from Selma to practically Maplesville. That was a terrible road, and there was improvements. He was bringing home the bacon all the time that he served, and I really wasn't that enthralled with Earl Goodwin, but after the last 40 years, I think he was one of the greatest senators that we've had in this district. But can you honestly say what your father did in the last 35 or 40 years that has helped improve the black belt? And I'll hang up and let you answer it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for calling. Mm-hmm.
So first of all, I am not, stuck on titles. So
we're going to go over a few minutes this morning so that we can give you ample time to answer the questions. Go ahead.
So quickly,
Take your time.
I'm not stuck on titles. So if you call me Malika or Miss Sanders, I'm fine with that. Just don't call me out of my name. But other than that, we can work on it. It's totally fine. The second thing is that you had brought up Venezuela, and while I don't remember being totally in awe of Hugo Chavez, I do remember being extremely inspired by the engagement of the people there, and I just think that it makes so much of a difference when people, when citizens are engaged.
What do you mean when you say?
So I saw, people, They were very engaged in helping to shape their community, not just waiting for Hugo Chavez as the president, or not just waiting for government to shape their community. They were, coming together, planning, strategizing, really engaged in changing the educational system. They were just very engaged in the process. So I think part of the challenge, part of the high point in American industry is when people were sort of more like pioneers. The ideas were flowing, and people were excited, and people were engaged.
Energy.
And the energy. And I think we have lost some of that, because we think, oh, okay, we're a great country, and then sometimes you can kind of sit back on your laurels, take it for granted.
You become apathetic.
You can become, and things don't grow when you get to that place.
Right.
It takes energy to grow. It takes inspiration. It takes engagement for things to grow. And so I like to see Dallas County at that place where we're engaged and things are flowing and things are happening. And so that was what I was mostly excited about on that trip. To your last question, it has been really interesting, not just being the child of somebody elected, but actually running for an office myself. So I think your question, so my father is not running, I'm running. And so that makes it a little bit more challenging for me to address this question, because, I think it's really a question best suited for him. But I do know of, many things that he has helped to do in our community. From helping to bring money so that I think it's the State Troopers Academy, could be located here. Because we're also in a decline, like our population is declining. There are a lot of challenges that we have just to keep what we have. Like I mentioned the hospital earlier. That we could be a community even without a hospital right now, except that he stepped in and really helped to make sure that we kept the hospital. I know that Wallace Community College has flourished, has grown, as a result of things that he has done. I know that we have had all kinds of programs for young people, museums and programs for young people who would not otherwise have access to certain kinds of opportunities if it wasn't for the work that he's done. I think my father has been really more passionate about people, right, than buildings, right? So he's not, I've not heard of a whole bunch of, buildings and those kinds of things, but his investment in human beings, particularly those who have been on the bottom, has been really, really amazing. To me, it goes back to that win-win, right? I think some people have to win. There has to be a bottom. Somebody has to be on the bottom. Somebody has to be on the top. And I think when you invest in people on the bottom, with the view toward everybody rising, right? Like expanding the pie, not just like giving the pie to this group, expanding the pie. I think that's a really important perspective to have. And so I think he has done a lot of work to invest in people who, if it wasn't for public schools, they would have nowhere to go, right? They wouldn't learn. And I think his own experiences inform that. As one of 13 children, who could never have been an attorney without public schools, right? That just would not have happened because his family just didn't have the money to do it. So I think there are a whole bunch of things, and one of the things I want to do is to because it's a question, put a list of things that he has done on my Facebook page. And one of the ways you can get to it is 888. You can text my vote, one word, to 888. The number you would text to is 888-111. My vote. Write it as one word, no spaces, to 888-111, and you'll get a link to my Facebook page, and I hope to have that up in the next few days so that you can get a broader list of the things and contributions that he's made.
Okay, Viewpoint, you're on the air. Okay, that call is gone. Now I'm going to ask you a few quick bullet questions that, because today at 11:30, Sabre Sanctuary is having a Paint the City Purple walk. And of course, Sabre Sanctuary deals with domestic violence. And I have some concerns about domestic violence. Governor Ivey just put a moratorium and a halt to the prisons, or giving early release to prisoners and inmates that have violent criminal histories. And I've just recently, as a matter of fact, I've been meaning to say, I had a listener that sent me some material. I received the material, listener. We'll get into that at another time. But, how can we expect for us to have a safe community when, if you have a felon that's been convicted of murder, and they've been convicted to 20, 30 years, and they're out walking the street 18 months later, and then they kill somebody else. So, this issue of violent offenders, violent people with violent histories, being able to get out on the street, those are two real serious issues that I'm assuming that as a state senator you can impact. But then the flip side to that is recidivism. You know, do you have any plans to help people who have been convicted of crimes? And I'm not talking about violent criminals, but people who have been convicted of some crime. Once they come out on parole, you know, I understand they have to pay a certain amount of money for restitution, I guess. I don't know what it's for, but if you don't have any, and if they can't make the payment and they can't get a job because they're a convicted felon, they're back in prison again. So what do you know, I know you talked about restorative justice.
Yes, and I didn't get a chance yet to go into it, but I will talk a little bit about it now. Domestic violence is very dear to my heart. And all other forms of abuse, child abuse, even molestation and rape, like those are things, and one of, a lot of people know about the Me Too movement, Tarana Burke, I worked with her. Latia Parker is a local lady who runs nonprofits to deal with issues like sexual assault and those kinds of things and domestic violence. These things are very dear to my heart, and so I am definitely interested in working with organizations to help deal with these things. And I think even law enforcement needs some more sensitivity training around it. I have heard, not necessarily in our community, but I think sometimes when you're dealing with issues like murder, right, you can begin to kind of say, oh, domestic violence, you can kind of flick your hand at it and say, this is not a big deal. But for families, it's a very big deal. And so I think we need more sensitivity training, around some of these issues, even in our legal system, to deal with some of these things. I think we need more, I think for both questions, for both the issue of recidivism and for issues like domestic violence, I don't think that we leverage the opportunity we have in schools. Let's just be honest. A lot of our community infrastructures have broken down, right? The family structure is not what it used to be. The institutions in our community, the close-knit, where people kind of look out for each other, not quite what it used to be. And I think part of it is that we have to bring some of those values back. We've got to make sure that some of those values are back in place so that we have strong families and strong institutions to help our communities be rebuilt. And I think part of it is our schools. I think we need to make a larger investment in our schools to make sure that classes are small enough so that where there are breakdowns in the community, teachers and administrators have extra resources in order to make investments around character education and values and principles in our children. I think that there are more creative things that we can do, more programs for children, recreation, so that they are learning, in the community how to deal with conflict resolution. As an attorney, one of the things that has disturbed me most is that oftentimes children are brought to court for fighting, and then when you ask, and I even had it happen with my own daughter, who started the fight, what that child did to try to avoid fighting, right? They went to a teacher, they went to a principal. There are not systems in place for children, to know how to deal with it, or even to engage somebody in a systematic way to how to deal with those things. Children need to know, because they become adults, how to deal with conflict, how to deal with bullying, right? We have to put those things in place. And I think that actually impacts both the domestic violence issue, right? Because a lot of times families get upset about things and then they don't know how to calmly and respectfully deal with those issues. They saw their parents deal with it in this way. We can have impact on that, as well as the recidivism rate.
Well, when I go through the police reports and I see harassing communication and fight in progress and gunshots victim and shots fired and suspicious characters and all the other cultural problems that are at the table. The law enforcement piece, we haven't talked about public safety. What do you think we can do if elected to help improve our public safety in Selma and the Black Belt, and we have this issue with cleanliness, being able to improve the way our cities and counties look, so we can be more attractive in the process of attracting new industry. And lastly, do you have an eye towards supporting existing industries to help them expand or to create new business opportunities in the Black Belt?
Yes. So I think the first part of that was around
public safety.
So, recently when I realized that, our police officers didn't have bulletproof, I was just astounded. How do we put our men and women who are risking their lives, in a situation where they have no basic protection? So that was in fact, I got with a group of men and women immediately and said, let's raise some money. If the city doesn't have it, let's just, we have people from Selma who live all over the country. Let's put out the word. Let's do some things online to just, because I think part of where we have to be right now in this pioneering state is not to just wait for government. If government can't handle it, let us come together and do it ourselves. And so I immediately wanted, to figure out how to do that. And as we went to talk, we actually, some of us actually contacted, the place where we get our bulletproof vest from to find out how much they cost, and begin to talk to lay out a plan on how to do that. So that's how I could address that, without being in office. But being in office, right, you have access to funds. You can help figure out those things. You have access to grants, even federal grants that will help with some of these things around law enforcement in local communities, depending on how you frame it. And so I think, those are some of the things that I would want to make sure that our folks have what they need. I think I also raise training. I think that there's a different level of training, an investment we need to make into training for law enforcement officers.
Now, the training, do you think that in any way it could impact, because we also have this tension in some communities that exists between law enforcement and the community. I don't know if you've given any thought to how you might be able to help promote a friendlier environment and engagement between law enforcement and the community.
I have. In fact, I'm a part of Selma Leadership Dallas County. I'm one of the students this term, and we went to the police station. We toured it, and it was really interesting because as an attorney, I go to the jail all the time, right, to talk to clients. But I had never been in the back. I'd never, seen the fullness of the situation.
Right.
And information and education is just so important. Lifelong learning is important. But as a part of that process, I sat with the other students listening to our law enforcement, and I learned so much about what their needs are, and I learned so much about the challenges that they face. And one of their concerns is that not enough people who see things, who see the murder happen, who see the crime happen, will speak up and say what they saw, so that people who need, because to me it's not just about gelling people. It's about how do we help folks get what they need, whether it is as children or whether it's when they, steal something out of Walmart. At those points, at those critical moments where we can affect recidivism, what kind of programs can we put in place to help people so that they don't progress further, so that it doesn't reach the level of murder? What kind of programs can we put in place? And one of the challenges, that the frustrations that they express, is that people won't share. But one of the challenges that people shared was, there's no protection for me. I already know, that what I'm dealing with. I know what kind of character this person has that I saw doing this thing, and I don't want them coming after me and my family. So we need to bring people together to have those conversations and to problem solve, to figure out how can we address both problems. Like, one of the things I want to do is to figure out how we come up with money for some witness protection. People need to be protected. We're going to solve these crimes. We can't just put people out there and just say, well, you're on your own. No, we've got to care enough about the person and about the crime, right, simultaneously, to make that work.
Okay, well, we could go on and on and on, and we've gone over our normal time. I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to get your platform out and for people to have an opportunity to call. Now, as we begin to close, now you got the floor. Anything you want to say to the voters of? We do have a couple of other counties that are within your district that can hear us also, and so now's your opportunity to give. I want to say, give your pitch, your message. I'll use, that's a kinder word.
So I think that all of us, blacks and whites together, people of other races. We have some Hispanic, some Asian. We have, you know, a community. And in that word community is the word unity, right? So our community doesn't work if we don't love each other, if we don't care about each other, if we're not concerned for one another. It just won't work. And so let us come together. Let's go out and vote on November 6th. You know, vote your conscience. Right? Of course I want you to vote for me. I'm running for office. But ultimately, I want you to vote your conscience. And I want you to vote for people who will bring our community together, who have heart and skill. Like I was saying about Walt Maddox, we have heart and skill to make sure that our communities flourish. I started off talking about the people of Israel. This trek to the promised land. I believe that we have such resources, richness in our communities throughout this black belt, that this is a land of promise, that we have promises that have been made to us that have not yet been fulfilled, and that if we work together, if we put God before our own selves, you know, my opinion about this, and I don't like this person about that. If we put God first, for real, not as a phrase, yes, God is the head of my life. No, I'm saying not as a phrase, but if we put him first, literally, he has given us principles that will take us into unity and that will help us take steps in this land of promise. And so go out and vote on November 6th so that we can make bold steps forward as a community.
Well, I guess that's we could go on, like I said. But, thank you for coming in. And
thank you for having me.
And I hope that people have gotten a better insight into your candidacy and what type of a state senator you'll make if elected on November the 6th.
Thank you so much for having me. You all have a blessed day.
Okay. And you will have a safe and enjoyable day. I will see you tomorrow morning. Good Lord willing.